Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 133 of the Retrospectors podcast, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. These past couple of months, James, we've played one of the all-time classics of video game history. This is considered by many to be not only one of the most important video games, but to many, their favorite video game ever made. James, were you very familiar with Ocarina of Time going into this episode and this playthrough, or was this as new to you as it was to me?
No, this was one of the thing that kind of I compared every video game, subconsciously to for many years. While as a kid and growing up, I did come across other games which I eventually enjoyed more, I still think of this as being probably the most defining game of my childhood for sure. I have a lot of memories playing through this on the couch with my father watching and us trying to figure out puzzles together. I remember being stuck on the water temple for a full 3 years because the internet didn't exist. And, one day as a kid, I found a guide on the shelf of a game store that helped me finally get through it. It was a game that I played over a long time, and I played the start of it specifically, probably up until the water temple, like around 10 or so times, and then only actually finished the game maybe twice.
Okay, so how familiar are you with it then? Like, as you were playing it through this time, did you know what to do at every turn, or was it still an engaging like video game experience for you?
I pretty much have every room and puzzle memorized up until like the fire temple, probably.
About half the
And then
game, yeah.
after, yeah, so about half the game was like almost muscle memory, which was very relaxing, honestly, and nostalgic. There was actually a couple of puzzles that I did forget, and one I actually had to look up, which kind of shocked me, because I was like, I should know this, but it's been like 15 plus years since I'd played it, so a lot of that memory had decayed. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to talk about, and I think I'm going to have to lean on you a bit for novel experience because like some of this stuff, like to me, not obvious that not other games were like this at the time
Hmm.
because this was like the video game for me. Like for example, Lock On was most people attribute this game with having popularized the concept of lock on,
Hmm.
which anytime I encountered that after this game, it just seemed so normal to me. But it was actually a big deal around the time. So yeah, this will be fun to talk about, I think.
Yeah, my experience is very different. So the only Zelda game I've actually finished is the original, which we did for the podcast probably about a year ago now, maybe if it was that long. I have played the beginning of this several times over the years. I didn't own a Nintendo 64 growing up, so it's something that I have tried to emulate a couple of times, but I never got really that far. It was pretty much I beat the first dungeon and that was it. Never even got as far as Dodongo's Coven. So this was all very new to me. Of course, I know about Zelda Ocarina of Time. It's impossible to not know about it because of how pervasive and influential it is as a video game. But a lot of the minutiae of the experience was completely fresh to me. And James, don't worry, I certainly looked up a walkthrough many times. I didn't have a schoolyard to go to discuss the game with my friends, so I had to do what I had to do to progress through the game. Otherwise, I think frustration would have set in. Um, I just think that we should also mention the way that we played Zelda Ocarina of Time because the best way to play it today is not on the Nintendo 64 or the 3DS. It's through a fan repackaging slash mod of the game called Ship of Harkinian. We used a similar thing with well, I used a similar thing with GoldenEye. Did you use the Project 1964 with GoldenEye, James?
Yeah, I did. We did that
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
And I used a similar thing again with Metroid Prime. I think you played on the original for that instead of that one. So basically, it's a fan project that repackages it into a super friendly, customizable package that's super easy to run and operate. So if you are to play this game today, Ship of Harkinian is absolutely 100% the way to go unless you're an absolute purist.
Yeah, so Shiba Harkinian's great because it's the original Nintendo 64 version of the game packaged to work with controllers plug and play. It just works out of the box, like there's very little setup you have to do, if any. And it contains like a heap of settings that make the experience much better. Uh, I only used two of them actually, and I still think it massively improved some aspects of the games. For example, one of the biggest criticisms of the original game was the water temple, mainly because you are constantly having to switch your iron boots on and off, which normally you have to go into a menu and navigate around and select the iron boots. And because you have to do this multiple times per room, it gets very tedious very quickly. Shipper Harkinian has an option that lets you bind equipment to arrows, just like the regular items, and that massively improves the experience. Similarly, there's an option to give the hookshot a reticule, which glows green when you can actually use it. I found that to be, much nicer than, what I did as a kid, which was like keep using it until it works. So I'd recommend, those two options.
I
There's probably more.
I didn't use that second option, so I certainly did a lot of using the hook shot until it worked.
Yeah.
Definitely, particularly before it becomes a long shot, there's a lot of kadink, kadink, kadink. That
Yeah.
noise is imprinted in my memory for life, I think. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, less is hookable than I was hoping for.
Yeah, so I wholeheartedly recommend it. It also has a nice autosave function, so the game will save in case. Because what I did was I was doing the Shadow Temple and I got distracted by my friends, and then I forgot about the game, closed it, and was like, oh shit, I've lost all my progress. And then I found that everything was saved because it just autosaves every 5 minutes or something, which
Yes.
is very
So the
nice.
saving system, I don't know if this is true in the original as well, but it seems to work in the sense that when you collect key items, they're yours for good. And when you, I guess, affect the world, effectively open shortcuts, they're also locked in for good. So whenever you leave the game or you die, progress is still saved in terms of key items acquired or significant dungeon progress made. It's just you have to re-enter at the beginning of the level. But most of the time, and it's the same with dying to the boss fights. Usually, the way it's set up is that once you have the boss key, and if you die in the boss, it's a pretty straightforward line to go from the beginning of the temple to the boss fight.
Pretty chill there.
I should introduce us, James. So, for those who have never heard of us before, we are the Retrospectors podcast. What James and I do each and every episode is that we play a classic or a cult classic game of the past from start to finish. Then we have an in depth review and discussion of our experiences. Critically, the thing that sets us apart from other podcasts is that we're not trying to appreciate these games in the context in which they are made. We're not driven by nostalgia, or at least we try not to be. It's going to be tricky for James this episode. What we try to do is we just try and assess how good these games are as if they had been released today, alongside any of the other modern titles that you see on Steam every single day. So this is a harsh standard of criticism. Like, we understand that video games have come a long way in the many, many years since 1998, where Zelda was released. But just as often as we have discovered that these games are outdated and awkward and not very fun, we found that they are sometimes secretly brilliant. And sometimes the way games did things in the past is not only just as good as what is done today, but sometimes even better. And it's been a wonderful journey of discovery, finding video games that do things differently, because sometimes the advancements that video games have made, in inverted commas, aren't so much advancements as they are sidesteps. And it's worth revisiting these old titles to kind of glean if there's anything about them that makes them special, and anything that can be learned and maybe redone in modern titles to get that special experience today. So Zelda, very, very basic overview. I know most of our audience are probably very familiar with it, but just to set the stage, It's an action adventure game developed by Nintendo, first released in 1998 for the Nintendo 64. One of the most landmark titles of all time. And in a lot of ways, it's synonymous with the Nintendo 64. Probably only Mario 64 or Mario Kart is a more famous title. You play as Link. He's a young boy of the Kikiri Forest people. And when I say young boy, he's probably like 10 or 12 or 9 or 8 or something, like very young. And
Yeah.
he essentially gets pulled into, I guess you could say he gets ensnared by destiny to save the world. And he does this first by going to see the Grand Deku tree, which is like a guardian spirit of the forest.
Deku.
Deku tree, sorry. I'm already butchering the pronunciation. James is going to be all over me this
That's
episode.
okay.
So he goes to the Deku tree and he kind of gets told it's his destiny to save the world. And he goes out into the broader world of Hyrule to explore and engage and interact with the people to, save the world. I don't know how else to say it, James.
Yeah, Ocarina of Time has a very standard fantasy sort of progression of, young boy with a calm and peaceful life in a remote village is suddenly life is thrown a curveball and has to like step up and become a man and save everything.
Literally become a man.
It's yeah, literally become a man and save the world. I think it's like very obviously targeted at a younger demographic. It was stood out to me like because every male friend that I have who's played this game, it like really influenced the way they grew up. And this was kind of true for me as well, but it was kind of interesting like having now grown up and met other people who had this experience and then coming back and playing the game and seeing how it did that is super fascinating to me. So I think that the like story and progression stuff, if you play it as an adult, is probably going to be very like bog standard and you've seen this a million times. I think for a like small child it's actually quite well done.
I mean, for me, this was Pokemon, right? Like, the thing about the Pokemon
Yep.
fantasy is that your main character is a 10-year-old, right? So it's a lot more
Yep.
relatable as a kid. For me, this was an incredibly generic story,
Yeah.
right? But, it works in a video game structure. You have to collect all the gems, and it repeats the same trick twice. You collect 3 gems, and you collect 5 or 6 gems, 6 gems, in order to, beat the big bad. But it functions fine. I will say from a story perspective, there's a couple of things I want to highlight. The first is I like how Ganon shows you a degree of respect. It's kind of interesting. He likes your spunk, you might say. So I like that about his character. He is a very generic evil overlord who just wants to rule the world. But like the respect he has for you is something that sets him apart a little bit, I think, from other villains. The other thing from a story perspective is that I think the game dips into genuine horror in a way which I was not expecting. This game at times is fucking horrifying, like genuinely scary. And the first time I encountered this, when in the graveyard, how you jump in the
Yeah, into the hole.
yeah, the sound effects, the design, the way you get stunned and frozen, and the way it kind of like zooms in on the zombie as they're approaching you, it is scary. It is scary in a way that I guess goes against this being a game for kids, Like it is quite surprising to me how scary this game gets at times, and I think it's executed wonderfully in this game. So I just wanted to highlight those two. For the most part, I think the game story is kind of generic and whatever, and I don't care. But those stood out for me.
Yeah, and that stuff stood out to me as a child too. Like those things you're talking about, the zombies, the re-deads, the ones that scream and the camera shifts to them and you get stunned. Those terrified me and gave me nightmares as a child.
The things with the hands, the hands coming from the ground.
The hands that fall from the ceiling and pick you up.
I know this is like
the hand. Oh yeah, dead hand. Yeah, the boss
Yeah,
in the well. Yep. Yeah, that thing's horrifying. Even like I noticed the enemies with the big eyeballs that shoot lasers, like the base has all these teeth that looks kind of Yeah, I actually think that the contrast here between the very optimistic standard hero's journey setting contrasted with these darker themes actually manages to sell some of the plot a lot
Mm,
better than I think other games tend to do. Like, it's normally very hard for a hero's journey plot that's this bog standard in a lot of ways to have that kind of weight to it. Like when when shit hits the fan and you come out into the town after it's been all fucked up. I
mm.
think that actually as a kid hit really hard, and I think that that would not work as well as it did if they didn't include these horror themes.
I think if this
So
game
I
was made today, it wouldn't have
all of
that
that would be
horror.
stripped out.
Yeah,
Yeah, all of
because
those rough edges would be
you kind
removed.
of have this aesthetic. Like when I think of Zelda, the first thing that comes to mind is it's kind of like this cutesy, cartoony sort of feel to it, right? Like think of the pose, you know, the ghosts. They're kind of like these giggling, cute ghosts, right? They're not like evil, scary ghosts. But then you have the zombies, and it's like a whole. It's a dramatic tone shift to the point where it wouldn't feel out of place in like a Silent Hill game.
Yeah,
But I do agree with you. I think that even though it's such a contrast, it does sell a sense of threat to the world and realism to the world that would otherwise wouldn't exist. So, yeah, it's not like you're running into this stuff non-stop. Like it's still probably a small sliver of the game, but the game is dramatically enhanced for its inclusion.
yeah. And I'll just briefly mention this, but it's like in the next game, Majora's Mask, this aspect is like the entire game. It's like they triple down on this thing
Mm.
and they make a game out of it, basically. So it's like that's super cool to me.
Yeah, it's also kind of surprising, is it? Like you wouldn't expect them to go in that direction necessarily.
Yeah, and nowadays, like ratings and things for kids are very, stripped down. So
Mm.
it feels like a product of its time, but I kind of miss it in a lot of
I think
ways.
for games for kids, you think Bug Snacks and Fortnite, and I don't know. It's got like
Bug Snacks is weirdly horrifying too. Actually,
I.
I think
But
it
when you think of the
has.
aesthetic more,
Oh yeah,
is what I'm talking
yeah.
about. Not thematically. Yeah. So yeah, I think that while it is generic in places, that this really does a lot to bring the world together.
Yeah, so that's like a basic intro to the story. I guess we can talk about more specific things we like to dislike about it later, but I kind of want to start this off with a discussion about pacing actually because this is such a like cornerstone game for me. It's hard for me to see certain things in that like third person game design sort of way that you do as a reviewer sometimes. It's just like a lot of this is like this is the way it is. Like when you're a kid and you don't know anything about the world, and when your parents tell you something, you just kind of have to accept it at face value because you don't have the means of thinking about it critically.
Mm.
It's just like
Or the
my
context.
parent. Yeah, it's like my parents told me that on the 25th of December, Santa Claus gives me presents, and I don't question that at all. I just believe it. That's the way the world is. I struggle to not feel this way about this game. It's like this is just how the game exists. But one thing that really did stick out to me is the pacing, which I was shocked at how good this is. I completely forgot. The game is like a non-stop conveyor belt of novelty and new situations. Like there are cutscenes and there is moving between locations, but as a whole, the game does its best to minimize this sort of stuff and leaves you with quite a dense world. Like the world of Ocarina of Time, I would describe the layout as like open world, but it's also actually it doesn't really resemble the modern definition of open world. It has very small areas, very small, densely packed rooms. Even like the biggest room in the game, Hyrule Field, really isn't that big compared to a lot of big areas in modern games.
It's pretty big. I
Um,
mean, that and the lake do stand out as big, kind of empty areas.
Yeah, but even then, like you get the horse to traverse it, and a lot of the action in Hyrule Field is on the east, like it's on one side of the field,
Mm,
so like the actual amount of traversing you have to do isn't that big. There's the section early on in the game where you go to Hyrule Castle to talk to Zelda for the first time, and you go through the town, through the, you have to sneak past the guards to get into the castle, then do more like a kind of mini stealth section to get to Zelda, and then a cutscene plays, and then the game teleports you out to Hyrule Field to save you the time of backtracking all that way. And the game does this on basically every single cutscene, which it but I think it uses as a load screen because it was always pretty. It's always been instant as far as I remember. Like you get to the end of a dungeon, it teleports you to the entrance. The game just always puts you in places where you don't need to do repetitive busy work in order to progress.
I'm sorry,
And I
James.
can't.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to challenge you a bit on this, if that's all right. Um,
Okay.
so what you're talking, I'm not denying the truth of your experience when it comes to pacing. However, I do think you've made an assumption here, and that assumption is that you always know what you're doing or where you're going.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, so what you're talking about, like that shortcut where she teleports you outside the town or whatever, that is helpful if you know where it is that you're going next, or that you don't need to return to the shop to buy an item, or go to that area to get some more rupees in order to enable something, or you just don't know, you haven't explored an area and you want to have a look because you think that's where you might go next. And I would say that a lot of those conveniences that you're talking about were not actually that relevant to me,
Okay.
just because I spent a lot of time figuring out what to do, and that involved a lot of running not aimlessly, but kind of like running in an exploratory fashion between these areas. So sorry, I don't want to deny the truth of your experience. I know that you've played this game many times, so I just want to say that for a new player, this pacing that you experience is probably not going to hit in quite the same way.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So like in terms of novelty and repetition, though, would you agree with that side of
Yeah,
things?
yeah.
Like the game,
And please go into that further, because I just want to say that the pacing of this game as an experienced player who knows what to do at any one point probably has a particular feel to it that is distinct and different, like in an overworld sense, from someone who
yeah,
doesn't know what they're doing and where to go, which was closer to what I was experiencing.
yeah, that's totally fair too. What I wanted to get at, like in terms of item progression and puzzle progression, in terms of the pacing, like I think there is a few kinds of ways you can handle games that have puzzles or challenge. Is that you can do either what Celeste does, which is you have four mechanics, and over the course of the game, you push those mechanics further and further and further, constantly coming up with new puzzles and things that surprise the player with like depth. Or you can have hundreds of mechanics and you explore them once each, kinda. And on that scale, I think Zelda's a lot closer, like Ocarina of Time is a lot closer to that second idea where there's like lots of stuff
Mm.
and you do each one once or twice. So there's like a lot of novelty, and there's also a lot of like depth and design space that feels like it's left on the table in pursuit of that novelty and pacing. Like you don't feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over. Um, and I think that that's one of the game's strengths. I don't think every game should be like this, but at that, I think it still succeeds quite well. Puzzles are presented in very isolated manner, like you have individual rooms that contain the bare essentials for solving the puzzle and no real distractions, as far as I can tell. So there's like lots of little self-contained things. There are quite a lot of items and upgrades in this game, and you get them at a very quite a good pace, I think. Like when we did Super Metroid, I think that's something we praised the game about
Mm.
was the steady flow of new stuff. I think this game does better than that, from my memory and me playing it again. You just get new stuff like all the time,
You
right?
know, it's really interesting. So I have heard that sentiment before as well. The idea that Zelda kind of like gives you a bunch of stuff and you only use each thing one or twice. And from my experience, that's a oversimplification, and I think it's one that if it genuinely was like that, I don't think I'd like it as much. But it hits a sweet spot, right? Because your inventory explodes over the course of this game, not just in terms of tools, but the number of songs and spells and abilities you get as the game progresses.
Yeah,
And I feel like the amount that it dips and reuses certain items is just right. I actually think it's close to perfect. Like, for example, Deku Nuts or Deku Nuts. I'm going to say that wrong. The item that stuns enemies. I was
yeah,
getting use of those throughout the pretty much the entire game, but there weren't many spots where they were mandatory.
yeah.
Same with the hook shot. Like the hook shot, I felt saw, yes, it's a tool that you use to traverse the environment, but you can also use it to interact with enemies. And a lot of the time, when I was in a new dungeon or a new situation, I would kind of try out the tools at my disposal, and I could usually find some way to reuse one of my tools to progress through the dungeon or interact with the environment,
Mm,
whether it was fire arrows or using the hook shot again or whatever it was. But it was never so much like, oh, these 40 things I have to like literally go through every single one of them in order to progress. It was usually I had just enough room to experiment and play around with my inventory without it becoming overwhelming.
okay, I don't disagree with what you just said. I guess I misphrased what I was trying to get across
Mm.
was that, like, the game never really
Requires those
pushes.
things.
It sort of feels like the puzzles never really push the items to their limits. Like, you never get these, like, moments. You don't often get these moments where you're forced to like use like six of the items in one puzzle in this really
Mm.
like brain bending sort of way, which I think is like fair. Like, it's not like the game would be. I don't even think the game would be better if they did do that. I just kind of want to get across the idea that like this isn't like, when you do Celeste Seasides and you have to like really understand every bit of the mechanic. It's not like that,
Yeah,
right?
each puzzle is usually one concept. Each puzzle's
Yeah,
one item, one concept in order to.
yeah. I actually want to hear more of your opinion about items and the puzzles, because that I think is kind of like the core draw of the game. I think if you had to say, like, if I was going to tell somebody why should you play this game, I think it's because items and puzzles. It's not about combat. It might be about story and like world building and like creepy stuff, but I think it's about puzzles and items.
Yeah, I guess the thing is for me with Zelda is that exploration and puzzles are very intrinsically linked in this game.
Hmm.
A lot of the time, solving a puzzle is less about, oh, how do I get past this, and more about exploring and finding the thing that you need to find in order to do the puzzle. And I think the big contrast here with Ico is the level design and the fact that you can go into first person perspective. I also think, just in general, the camera does a lot less to hide things from your perspective. Whether it's a consequence of the level design or not, I could usually identify what it is I needed to do. It's not that I never got stuck, because I did. I consulted a walkthrough multiple times on my time playing this, but I felt like the spaces were generally self-contained enough that I could figure it out. And when I did have to look up a walkthrough, generally I felt it was my error and not the game's fault.
Hmm.
This is more mostly talking about the dungeon puzzles. However, the outer dungeon puzzles, the ones in the overworld, those I had some more problems with in terms of the logic to figure out that that's what I needed to do in order to progress.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So let's talk about, I guess, the overall structure of progressing through the game.
Mhm.
So I would say that we could probably summarize the game best by talking about the intro. So, normally, what happens is that there is a bit of like light social puzzle solving, kind of, in that you're out in the overworld, you need to A, discover where the next dungeon is, B, interact with some NPCs in order to get critical information or items that let you access the dungeon. And then, like, you do the dungeon, you wrap up the cutscene, you go to the next like location, and normally the dungeons and the NPCs and the kind of like side quest stuff related to it are kind of in the same spot. So at the beginning of the game, you wake up in the Kokiri Forest, and have to go inside the Great Deku Tree to purge the evil inside of him. And so the first part about the game is actually getting your equipment, getting your sword, getting your shield, probably getting some sticks, getting some Deku nuts, and then getting enough, money in order to buy the shield, and then going to talk to the tree, and then going inside and doing the dungeon.
So this is the part of the game where I wasn't as crash hot on it, and there's a few instances of this happening. Like sometimes it's fine, and you can logically follow what it is you need to do, and you usually are pushed in the right direction by Navi. But there were a couple of instances where I was like, I don't really know how I was meant to figure this out outside of just trying every combination of X and Y together until I progressed. The first is there's a point where you have to play Sari's song for the, what are the rock people called?
Yeah, for the Gorons,
For
you
the
have to play
Goron.
a song
You have
for
to play
Darunia. Yeah,
that song for the Goron in order to break him out of his bad mood. And I'm not figuring that out. It just wouldn't I didn't connect the dots that that's what I would need to do to break him out of his bad mood. And
yeah,
there's another one where you have to do a mini game in order to progress, or get something in order to progress. And some of these things were just a bit too much of a reach for me. And I think with enough time, you will naturally stumble upon these. But I didn't like this part of the game, or this puzzle solving, if that's what it is.
yeah. So with Darunia, I think the hint is supposed to be if you talk to the Goron outside the room, he says that Darunia loves the song of the forest.
Okay, I missed that.
And then I actually also looked up a walkthrough for the bit you're talking about, which is getting the bottled note to make the King Zora move so you can get to Jabu Jabu. But I actually do agree with you here, is that this, I feel, has the most potential for getting stuck, and not being obvious. Like, I think there's this big, like, everybody talks about Navi and how and like chattery she is, and is like constantly
I
trying
did
to tell
not
you where
find
to
that at
go.
all.
Yeah, it was like the big like ongoing meme for Ocarina is like, hey, listen.
The
Um,
thing is, you can just ignore her as well. Like, you can listen to her if you want, or you can just keep going.
yeah, and I think it's necessary too because of how confusing the game can be without it. And even with it, sometimes it's very easy to not know what to do. I actually like. I really do think that in the dungeons, puzzle clarity is much higher.
Yep.
Um, Whereas I think part of it is that the game has a fairly linear intended route. I know you can like sequence break and do stuff if you're really trying, but I think if you're following the intended path and not doing anything funny, because if it was non-linear, you could just stumble on stuff and do it as you found it, but because the game sort of requires you to do certain things and set orders, you can get lost and stuck, I'd imagine, is what happened to you a few times.
Yeah, well, I just wasn't sure how to progress, so I'd end up wandering around for a while before kind of giving up. And the thing is, I don't even think this is unintended. I think that the game has a lot of side stuff for you to engage with,
Mm,
and there is a lot of optional stuff to do at all times. So I think if you do get stuck on the overworld, the intention is for you to wander around for a while, and eventually narrow down and figure out what it is you need to do to progress. And I think that if you were playing this as a kid who attends school back in the day, pre-internet, you would have told your friends, "Hey, I've just done this," and they would know what to do for you to go further. Then when you went back home, you would kind of do the next bit. It's just that
yeah.
from the perspective of someone who has less time to idly wander around in video games, this was incompatible with how I needed to play. Like I needed to progress through the game. So
Mm.
I don't know, James. I feel like it can be a bit vague at times, but I don't think it's like on the level of adventure game logic. Like I've expressed a lot of my frustrations
Yeah.
with point and click adventure games. This is not the same as that. It's just that there's a level of vagueness here that prevents your progression sometimes because things don't make the most sense.
I do think adventure games are actually a cool comparison here because I think now that you've said that, it makes something kind of clear to me, like click in my head. So what I think the problem is here is that when you're in a dungeon, right, and you get a cool puzzle, when you solve that puzzle, like if you do it on your own, there's like this sense of satisfaction or like fulfillment. Like I figured it out, I solved the puzzle.
Mm.
With everything in the overworld, it's you don't really get that sense of fulfillment when you finally find the thing that you're supposed to do because it's not really a puzzle in the sense of like a fixed challenge that you're trying to overcome. It's just like you have to go to this spot and press A on the NPC. So most of the time, at least, there is some stuff actually I think that does evoke that in the overworld. For example, when you need to get into the Shadow Temple, you need to get the Lens of Truth. And in order to do that, you need to basically get the Song of Storms from the Windmill Guy as an adult, and you need to go back to Kakariko Village because the guy in the windmill tells you that in the past, this annoying little kid came there and played the song and it ruined everything. So you have to go back and you have to ruin his life, which then opens the mini dungeon into one of the best mini dungeons in the game, I think. And that's actually a real puzzle, right?
Mm.
Like that has some sense of I solved it. Whereas like I have to go and talk to this guy somewhere it just doesn't give you that, right?
Yeah, that's a
Um,
pretty good way of putting it. I I feel like this is an instance where you don't. I never really felt guilty looking at a walkthrough for this though. I always felt these in between bits as a way to get to the next bit was me just shortcutting the experience in a way.
mm,
Like it's hard. I feel like the best way to play this game is probably you set aside 2 weeks and you're very relaxed and you
yeah,
jump on and you play for a bit and you mess around with the systems. But it's just not how I can play this video game
play it as a reviewer,
as an
right?
adult, as a
Yeah.
reviewer. I can't just sit and relax and enjoy it. So yeah, I do think here the expectations and the reality of how I play video games is shaping the experience somewhat.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Should we have like a music break and then talk about one of the dungeons in specific?
That sounds good. Let's have some music and then we can deep dive into how a dungeon actually functions and how we felt about them.
All right, so I think the only appropriate thing to do with music here, and actually, music's an interesting topic because music isn't just about, ambience in this game. There's actually a gameplay component to it. And I think that, well, it's hard for me, right? Because all of this music is so iconic and like childhood defining. But some of it I still really love. Some of it I love less when I played through it. In particular, I love the theme of the Forest Temple, which is, in my opinion, probably my favorite dungeon just because it has a fantastic theme and sort of narrative of like you have the idea of the lost woods out the front, which is like confusing and kind of like maze like. And then I think the temple itself is the perfect embodiment of being lost in the woods. It plays this haunting music that is kind of like, is there someone following me? Or like it feels a bit creepy, but also like whimsy and mysterious. And, I'm excited because I'm on this big adventure. I think it does just the best job of kind of like bringing all those themes together in a musical piece.
I mean, I don't think the entire soundtrack is 10 out of 10s, but the ones that are 12 out of 10s. The good music here is I mean, it's some of the best music ever made, and for good reason. It feels almost redundant to be saying this because I feel like everyone knows how iconic and incredible, like that Hyrule Field theme is, but it's flawless. It's so good. Some of the music in the temples was, it didn't really do it for me, but this one is one that did. And I also think that the Forest Temple is my favorite theme in the game. So,
Yeah, that was something special about getting out into Hyrule Field for the first time because the forest's kind of like I think they did a great job of that, like that mini cutscene with Saria that plays beforehand is kind of like tonally dour.
mm,
So then that contrast that just hits you in the face when you exit and you're in this bright sunny environment, and like the world is yours to explore. It's just like a great feeling.
that day night cycle, man, though, like, what is it? 30 seconds? It feels like it.
Oh, good, good. I don't want to stand around waiting for it. They even give you a song to speed it up, which is good. But yeah, Forest Temple theme is excellent, so here it is. Alrighty, so that was the Forest Temple theme. Did you want to talk about it actually? I think we should do a deep dive on one of the dungeons, and I kind of want to do one of the later ones, not the early three, just because there's like a little more going on that can be a bit more confusing. Like, I think talking about the Forest Temple, and then we absolutely have to talk about the Water Temple at
Mm.
some point. So like, I want to hear your thoughts on like going through these, the progression, getting lost, the puzzles, the enemies, that kind of stuff.
So the idea is that most of the dungeons are structurally quite similar in a lot of ways. You'll come to the entrance of one of these temples and you'll have several different ways to go. Usually, you are not restricted down a linear path, there are multiple paths to go. However, a lot of those paths you can't actually make any progression down because you're missing a key item or you haven't done something in some other area of the dungeon which will allow you to progress. So you, by process of elimination, keep going down pathways until you reach the end of one or get the critical item. A lot of the time, it's getting these little silver keys which will allow you to progress. Then you, once you have a key item, you return to the next branch of the path and you push forward that one as far as you can reasonably go. And each room usually has a mini puzzle or combat challenge or something that you need to solve in order to progress. Uh, I think for the most part, this works really well. I think that the only problem with it really is that it can be a lot of hitting dead ends or places that you can't progress. And if ever you lose your place or forget things or don't remember, you can get quite lost and end up running in circles quite a while.
Yeah, that can happen. Like, I remember this happened to me at the start of the Forest Temple, and I knew that this was going to happen because it happens to me literally every time in this dungeon, is that I always forget, and I completely forgot again until I remembered and was so annoyed at myself that if you need to go straight to begin with to get a key in this fight room, and if you forget to do that, it's like, because you kind of need to get like two separate keys to unlock the rest of it. And in the water temple, if you miss a key, it's quite hard to like figure out which branch you didn't explore. So it can happen for sure. I do think like the early dungeons, the first three, it doesn't happen. Well, I guess I just am so familiar with them. I think it's less
Well,
likely.
there's less of that key thing, right? The silver keys get
Yeah.
introduced in the adult dungeons, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so the little silver keys are really the thing because a lot of the time, yeah, you actually need to get two keys, so it can lead to this
Yeah.
pretty frustrating situation where you find a door with a lock, you find a key, then you go back that way, you use the first key, and then you run to a second door with a key. You have to go back again and then find it again. So now this sounds. I just want to say this sounds frustrating, right? But this is where the concept of exploration comes in, where the idea behind these dungeons is that you are meant to feel a little bit lost, and part of the process is building a mental map of how these
Yeah.
dungeons fit together. So, this is just all part and parcel of the experience. It can be frustrating, that is absolutely true. I don't want to take away from that aspect of it. It's just that sometimes this is the price that you have to pay in order for exploration to be a thing. Exploration
Hmm.
sometimes demands you getting stuck and having to retread your path and go back to where you go, and generally it is a price that I am happy to pay. Where I get frustrated is where I miss something and I genuinely don't know how to progress, which happened to me on the forest temple for an annoyingly long time.
Yeah. I really like this dungeon. I think the theme is great. This idea of it being kind of confusing and mysterious, I think they play that up a lot. You have all of this stuff that's a bit odd. Like, there are those corridors that twist when you shoot
Fantastic
the
mechanic, loved it.
buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah, super cool. Like, it's like the rooms on the other side of the door rotate, and then the corridor is like this twisting, like, thing you walk down, and your character and the camera shifts as you're walking along the twisting path. Super cool. And then like you have stuff like at the bottom, there's that switch. You need to move, like rotate the walls to open
Oh,
up the
dude,
doors in the right
do you
spot.
know how long I got stuck there because I didn't realize I could even rotate that? I was like, how is I see that? So there were two times this happened. Firstly, there where I just had no idea. I spent a long time getting on top of the lift because you can kind of jump. Because I was like, this is what you must have to do. It's Dark Souls. You have to get on top of the lift and then do this, and it didn't do anything. So, but also it didn't click to me that I needed to shoot the portraits with the bow. So
Yeah.
once again, just a lot of endless wandering. And that's where to me the game maybe could do a little bit more in terms of hinting to me what it is I need to do. Either that or I'm stupid. But I guess for me, with all of the branching and getting keys and everything, I was on board with that kind of design. And the Water Temple, I think, is a really good example of that design. It's when you get specific puzzles, I guess, that you can't solve that lead to endless wandering around the dungeon that I feel like it's not firing on all cylinders.
So, like, the process of the forest temple is kind of like you walk around and then you find the map, and then you find the compass, which lets you. I didn't look at the map at all until I became an adult, at which point I started finding it more useful.
Hmm.
But you eventually wander around until you find the key item, in this case, the bow, which allows you to then now shoot the eye switches because you actually lost a projectile weapon in the slingshot.
Hmm.
And then, like, there's all sorts of new stuff that opens up. Like there are these puzzles that require you to shoot the arrow through fire to light a torch on the other side of the room. There are switches you need to click. There are enemies you can now clear off the walls to climb them, that kind of stuff. And the boss requires the use of the bow as well. I actually think Phantom Ganon's one of the best bosses in the game too, design-wise.
So
It's
interesting.
like
I hated
super
it.
unique. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand what people see in this boss. I found it the first phase you literally can't take damage if you stand in the right spot. So you don't even need to guess correctly or react. You can just take literally as long as you want. And then the second phase, the ping ponging is janky as fuck. Like sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes the projectile disappears. And the timing took me several deaths to get the hang out of, but once I got the hang of it, I just did it without taking any damage. Um, Not a good boss fight.
I think it's cool conceptually, like the visual and aesthetic direction of the room with the paintings and the
Mm.
guy on the horse
It's
coming out
definitely
of them.
thematic. I just found
Yeah,
mechanically, as I did most of the combat in this game, to be extremely mediocre. There was probably only one boss fight which I thought was actively good.
interesting. Okay, which was that?
The one with the two sorceresses, where you need to use the mirror shield.
Yeah, that one I actually had to close my game, change a setting to beat, because I think it's you can with the Z targeting, you can either like tap it to turn it on and then tap it to turn it off, or you can hold it.
Mm.
I found it actually impossible without the hold, because I couldn't hit the first phase with the laser.
Mm.
With the lock on, it just refused to cooperate.
But
That's
that
interesting.
boss I thought was very cool. I liked it a lot. I found
It's
the
the best. I think it's the best boss in the game.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get into the combat later, but for me, the highlight. So, generally speaking, you're talking about pacing before. I think that Zelda excels when things are slower paced, like
Okay.
when things are at a more comfortable exploratory speed. I don't mean in the sense that you're moving slowly. Like obviously, there's platforming that requires timing and everything. Just when the action isn't very intense, when there are no enemies and you're kind of just exploring and solving puzzles and progressing through the world and figuring out how to get places. When the game puts you in most of the action scenarios, that's when I started to enjoy the game far less.
Well, let's talk about combat then, because
Mm,
I do think that this is probably one of the like, if not the weakest part of the game these days. Because I do think that at the time of the game's release, it was quite good. This idea of having lock-on targeting in a 3D space was pretty like novel at the time. There were only a hand, like maybe one or two games that did this prior, and no, probably not as well or as in depth. These days, however, like the lock-on system, in my opinion, has been far surpassed many years ago, and is a bit janky. And the enemy combats that are designed using it feel a bit janky. Like lock on makes fighting the flying enemies much easier, for example. However, the enemies that like kind of they're kind of like proto Dark Souls enemies, right? Like the lizard guys and the skeletons, where you have this like you're locked onto each other and you're kind of like circle strafing each other. But it's much more primitive, right? They basically come down to waiting for them to attack, blocking, and then punishing them, and
mm.
that's the best you can do. There's no I can get aggressive or like kind of thing that you can learn to make the fights go quicker. They always kind of take the same amount of time. And the Mook enemies are mostly entirely trivial. I will say that my favorite enemy, like Mook enemy, was probably the clam shells in the water temple, because you like need to get them to open their mouths and then shoot the bit inside them to damage them. Like more interesting, whereas most things you just run up and hit them.
Some things you need to stun first and then they become vulnerable. But I think here the real culprit is the lack of camera control. And I think that this is once again why it feels fine when things are slower paced, but when things are action orientated, it feels pretty bad. So Zelda
Yeah.
does not have camera control in the way we understand it in modern games. You cannot use the control stick to swing the camera at will. All you can do is press a button to orientate the camera behind yourself. And it does so instantly, so you can instantly orientate it to the camera behind you, but you can't like be moving and rotating the camera at the same time. So generally in a lot of 3D games today, you have the option of locking on and orientating yourself to an enemy, or you can freely move around and basically use the camera and move the camera around at the same time to determine what angle that you hit at. And generally, the more experience you get with these kinds of 3D action games, the less you need to use lock on, or it's not that it's useless or anything. It's just you get better at understanding relative distances. You can't really do any of this in Zelda, with the exception, I understand there are people who have played this game long enough so they've mastered these controls. I'm just talking like as a regular human being who is more used to modern control schemes. This felt pretty bad. It felt really bad, and I think that it came to a head for me in that boss fight in inside the fish's belly.
Okay.
The boss fight inside the fish's belly for me was just a complete fucking mess. Like I was
Yeah.
just kind of locking on sometimes, kind of I wasn't, just chucking the boomerang out. It kind of tracked it sometimes, it didn't track it other times. uh it just felt like a complete mess of me just using the boomerang and swinging my sword when I got the chance. There was nothing satisfying about it. It didn't felt like I'd mastered the fight at all. It just felt like a big clunky mess. So I really disliked the combat in this game. I don't think it's as bad as Ico because it is functional most of the time. And the conceptual stuff behind it, like, oh, I have to stun this enemy, then I can attack or whatever, works fine. That system of weakness, identifying weakness and attack. Like, there was another enemy you had to, like, it was like a fire enemy. You had to hook shot it towards you. You know the one I'm talking about?
Which one?
It was like covered in fire, but if you put the hook shot on its body, you could hook it to you, and then it lost the fire from around its body.
Do you mean like the slug?
No, no, no. It was
Oh,
like a
you
mini
mean
boss
the
or something.
mini boss
Yeah,
in the fire temple? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So like the concept behind that was kind of cool, and you could kind of interrupt its movement to get behind it. So like it works. It just never felt good to me. Like I never said I would never say I actively enjoyed the combat, except as maybe as a way to break up the pacing between the puzzles.
Yeah. That's pretty much that's interesting you mentioned the camera. I hadn't considered that, but I think you're absolutely right there, is that because the game's camera control is so limited, it prevents like the game very poorly supports you fighting lots of enemies at once. So you're kind of stuck fighting one or two enemies at a time in order to compensate for that, which kind of limits the complexity. But I do tend to think that, like, as you said, a lot of the enemies tend to be more puzzly in nature,
Mm.
which I think helps a bit and works well with the item system. That's, I think, when the game's at its best, is when it's like getting you to use a bunch of items. Unfortunately, like, you really don't have this thing like you would have, like, maybe in Doom or something, where enemy composition matters or makes the fight feel different. It's all very limited and basic. I'd say there's three or four kinds of enemies. There's like super mooks, there's like more elite sort of enemies like your lizard foes and your skull foes, the skeletons. There's mini bosses and then your full on boss fights. I think that at each stage it's more enjoyable. Basically, I actually like most of the bosses in this game, and that one, like, I understand what you're saying about that being frustrating. It's
Mm.
actually my second favorite boss.
Wow.
um like, because I really enjoyed the progression of, there's like there's
It's like
sort
a
of like
five phase boss or something.
yeah, but there's like it's like soft phases. They're not like Like, normally in games these days, you kind of have like a phase two of a boss where the boss just transforms into a completely different enemy
Mm.
and fights you with a full health bar or something. Whereas I think these stages, unlike most modern bosses, naturally flow from one to the other. Like, there's a clear logic behind I need to do this to open up this weakness, and then I need to do this to nullify this weakness, and then I can attack the boss's main body, which feels more natural to me than like I'm playing Bloodborne, I get Ludwig to half health, he transforms into a different thing and then fights me.
That is so weird because I think that the thing about fighting a Dark Souls boss is that it is it is way more natural than fighting a Zelda boss. A Zelda boss is
No, I agree. I agree with that for
oh,
sure.
okay, because yeah,
No, no,
in a Dark Souls or whatever boss, you find natural openings to attack them in, and your singular boss fight will be unique in its own way in terms of where you did damage to them. Whereas a Zelda boss fight is fundamentally puzzly, where you identify the weakness, which will allow you to do damage to them.
no, I agree with that
Okay,
because I think like when we talk about Twin Rover, the two witches, like to me that boss is more like modern bosses where phase two is like this hard. It's like completely different to phase one.
yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to get across is Baronade, the Jabba Jabba Belly boss.
yeah.
I think the transitions between phases feel more logical to me.
Right, because it's just a very gradual. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Not that it's like actually moving your character and fiddling with the boomerang is tedious for sure.
Mm.
I just thought it was interesting that way. Um, I think the combat is fine. I don't think it's offensive. I actually think the more Dark Souls like bosses, I hate doing this like anachronistic throwback thing, like comparing an old game to
Oh,
a new one.
so
You know what I
Souls
mean?
takes so much from Zelda. Like it takes
Yeah,
so much from
yeah.
Zelda, and it has continued to do so. Elden Ring is ripping off Breath of the Wild very liberally. Like there's clearly an enormous amount of respect for the Zelda games in the Souls universe.
I feel like 90% of Souls enemies trace their origin back to being locked onto this big skeleton and circle strafing in the room. Like, I feel like that's the entire Souls genre comes down to that one enemy in Ocarina of Time. It's really, I think those are the least fun enemies to fight in Zelda because you don't have much agency. There's not a lot of room for creativity.
I mean, I was trying to figure it out. I got better at fighting them. Like anticipating when they're going to do the jump over you. You can actually turn around and block it in time. But I do agree that is mostly just attacking after you block.
I actually really liked the big suit of armor enemies because you could be aggressive and take risks.
Mm.
Whereas these enemies, I hate. Same with the wolves. If you try to use items on them, they just clank off them and they do like this defensive posture that nullifies the item, which to me is against the spirit of the game. Like, I want to use all my different items. Like, the enemy should be beatable using different items and in different ways. Like, that seems more fun to me. It just kind of tedious.
Yeah, it's like in their heads they're like, we want this to be a duel, so we want this to be purely focused on these basic mechanics.
There was one good duel in the game. I want to know your opinions on the Shadow Link fight, because that actually requires you to use your arsenal and move your character in a way that lets you get hits off without taking damage in return. Yeah, Dark Link, and it's
Yeah.
actually kind of like difficult.
I basically was able to beat him using jump attacks. I realized that there was kind of like a window where you could get him if you time jump attacks well.
One thing I didn't know, but I read recently, that boss has more HP if you've got more hearts collected, because he just has the same health you do,
Ah, right.
which makes a lot of sense, yeah.
How did you feel about the difficulty of this game? Because to me, it felt like this game had custom difficulty in a lot of ways. Because if you go in stocked up with berries in a bottle, it's like you have infinite health.
Yeah.
If you don't, then some of these fights can be extremely challenging.
It's hard for me to know. Can you tell me about the ones that were harder for you?
Oh, so the Forest Temple
Yep.
boss killed me like
Yeah.
7
I died
times
to it like once. Yeah.
because I was going into it with 3 hearts,
Okay.
pretty much
Yeah.
every time, and I was really struggling with the timing of the ping ponging, so I would get hit, and it does a full heart when you get hit.
It's the size of the room. It's too small, so the camera can't sit behind you when he's doing that. So
And also, you have to get far away enough from him to get the ping pong battle even going. If it's at a weird angle or he's moving, you'll attack it and it will go off to the side and won't do anything. That's what I mean by it feels janky. Like it feels strange. And sometimes I would stun him straight away, and sometimes I wouldn't, and it would get faster with each instance of the ping ponging happening, and I didn't know how many ricochets it was going to take before he got stunned. But the thing was, I realized as I was just being stubborn and going into it over and over again, I had 2 bottles at this stage, I think. I could have just filled 2 bottles with
yep.
fairies and then the fight's trivial because I have 21 hearts effectively or whatever it is.
Yep.
So I tried to not do that. So I was generally not having a fairy in a bottle. And I think the game is probably more fun that way because you do carry a sense of threat as you go through it. But there's nothing actually stopping you brute forcing your way through most of this game just by having,
Yeah.
you
3 or 4
know,
fairies
triple
bottles.
triple your health. Yeah, because each one of those doubles your health, which is ridiculous, honestly.
Yeah, that crazy. I see what you mean. Because I always, as a kid, like knew about doing that, and I always felt like it was weird. I remember only really doing that for the last boss as a kid, but then when I did the last boss as an adult, like the other day, I don't think he hit me. This is like
It wasn't difficult. No.
no, which is funny. I think I lost the most. I think I died to the witches a couple times just because I couldn't get the angle
Mm.
on the. That's a cool fight, though. I think the gimmicks are like super, like the best in the game. Also, it's the only boss other than Ganondorf that has personality. Like the cutscenes where they're arguing with each other. It's like so stupid.
I want to talk about the water temple.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay, so let's just before we get your opinion, right? Like everyone knows that everyone hates the water temple, right? Because it's a confusing mess that is super hard. I got stuck on it. Switching the boots is tedious as fuck. Changing the water levels is tedious as hell. But when I went through it again this time, I think it's actually just one of the best dungeons and that children are stupid.
It is a very good dungeon. And it's also, I think it's definitely the best designed dungeon. Like from a design standpoint, it's like very clever, right?
Mm,
How it all fits together. My only criticism of it is that the water manipulation only happens in one direction. So there's
yeah,
like the flow through of the dungeon requires you, like if you miss something, which I definitely did, you kind of have to just flow through the dungeon in the same way.
yeah.
However, there is a spell in this game that I used a lot and I've never heard anyone talk about. It kind of like creates a warp point. Did you use this spell at all?
Pharaoh's Wind is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I didn't cast it a
dude,
single time.
I used it in every dungeon. I think it's very, very, very good spell, and I think that it tremendously helps with the navigation because a lot of the time, before you know what you're doing, you can just set it to the main room or whatever it is, and it just reduces the amount of backtracking required. And the jars always give you magic power, so you can cast it and recast it as much as you like. Whenever I found a key door where I'd like miss
Ah,
the
that's a good
key,
idea.
I
Yeah,
would I would set this teleport spell, and I use this teleport spell and set it to one of the water manipulation points, and it helped me navigate the water temple a lot. But it's just an extremely well designed dungeon. Water temple's great. I liked that the focus of it was on the puzzle design of it. Like the combat here is non-existent really. There aren't any combat challenges until you get to Dark Link,
yep.
and the upgraded item you get in it is sweet. Water temple's great. I think that, and I hope that they continue to iterate on Zelda dungeon design in this fashion, where the entire dungeon is kind of like an interlocking mechanism in a way.
Yeah, no, no, I know what you mean. Like, it's the dungeon's main design is like a vertical shaft with like a pillar in the middle that has rooms inside it and platforms on the outside. And you like need
Hmm.
to change the water level, equip the boots so you sink and float.
There are doors you can access and doors you cannot access, and some of them require you to sink and some of them require you to float. And when you change the water level, you get different access levels. And as you progress through the dungeon, you basically need to start at the bottom of the dungeon and work your way up, which is counterintuitive, but trust me, it makes sense once you're in there. And that lets you change the water level from high to low to medium, and you can kind of keep doing loops
Yeah.
of the different of the dungeon as you progress through it, and it just works. It just works, and it makes sense as you progress through it.
It is quite a problem if you miss a key in this dungeon, though, because your only solution is to go through every room and keep changing the water levels. And I think the dungeon has higher highs and lower lows, is kind of how I'd describe
Hmm.
it.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't. People are really put off by this busy work of the boots. I didn't really get that feeling as much, I guess.
Yeah, because you bound them to a button, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't bind them to a button normally. You have to open the menu and scroll. Then you have to change the menu to the
Yeah.
side, and then you have to, and then it's at the bottom, so you have to like click down and then click it. Especially
Yeah.
if you're in a situation where you need to like turn it off and on a couple of times, like
Mm.
so.
Which you do need to do.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, yeah, it's just if you have that quality of life, I think that alone changes the dungeon from fun to unfun. I think the boss kind of sucks too. It's kind of boring. You just
Yep.
kind of like shoot it and it dies. And visually, it's it's water with an eyeball in it.
It's water.
It's just water.
It's just a water tentacle.
Yeah. But no, I think it's good. Always really liked the Spirit Temple just because I think the
Mm.
mirror shield's
It's a
super
cool it's
cool.
cool to revisit, right?
Yeah.
From a different perspective. It kind of it clearly to me this temple kind of pushes the whole kid adult thing front and center, right? Because I thought there'd be more of this of like changing between them because the game is called Ocarina of Time, and the whole story revelation in this game is that you can move between the world as it was 7 years before and the world as it is today, or the other way around, depending on how you look at it. And it felt like this temple was trying to very clearly showcase how young Link and adult Link both had different strengths and weaknesses and could interact with the temples and the world in different ways. I thought you'd have to like swap back and forth 5 or 6 times, but that's not actually how it functioned.
Yeah, you only need to do it like once or twice mandatorily. I did it as a kid a lot more because it was cool. Like, I kind of feel like they should have pushed this a little further because conceptually it's super cool. And I think that this was only really possible as an idea due to the scale, like the smallish scale of the world. If this was like a
Hmm.
massive open world game, I mean, you'd basically have to redo the whole game twice, so it's like kind of ridiculous. It's more limited in scope, the things they change between the timelines here, but it does a good job. And can I say, like, as a kid, this idea of going from young Link to old Link, who is, because when you play as a child, you're like the same age as young Link. And then, like, you see adult Link and he's so cool, and you're like, now I want to become an adult or whatever, right? Like that's the experience we had as kids playing this. Was he's so cool and he gets cool weapons, and when you're a little kid you can equip the Hylian shield, but it's too big for you, so you kind of have to crouch under it, and then as an adult you can finally fit in your clothes. I don't know, there was just something
Oh,
very resonant about that when growing up.
that sorry, this is a bit of a sidetrack, but you just reminded me because that's how using the shield that way is how you get to one of the first fairies.
Yeah, the
Um,
dungeon.
you know how I talked about aesthetically how the game was like creepy and horrifying.
Yeah.
Those fairies a fucking creepy as shit. Oh my god, like it was so off-putting when I encountered them. It was not what I was expecting at all, but it was good. Like it was good that this weird magical creature made me feel so uneasy. They're otherworldly. That's the feeling I get from. They genuinely feel like magical creatures from another plane of existence, right?
Yeah.
Not just our they've once again it feels adult in a way that I wasn't expecting from this game.
I really liked that scene when you climb up to Ganon's tower finally, and he's like, the first part of it is him playing the pipe organ. It was like a great bit of anticipation. Anticipation is something they understand in this game quite well. Especially, I don't know if you had this experience, but when I was a child, the chest opening animation, I know there's a cool item in this box. I don't know what the item is, but it's going to be cool, and then they build it up super hard with you slowly opening the chest.
And the music theme, yeah.
They get that. Contrast two, I find that they use light and shadow really well for a game this old. For example, in the first boss fight, it's really dark in there, except for the glowing eyeball of the boss, which I kind of think really adds to the feel of the fight. Same with in the encounters with Ganon and stuff. They really do a good job of dimming the screen and drawing your attention to, his eyes or the Triforce on the back of his hand, that kind of thing.
How do you feel about the look of the game generally, James?
It's hard because I just like generally like love this game inherently, but I think a lot of it, like texture work and stuff like that, really hasn't held up very well. But the underlying kind of like design and direction, I think, does. Like, even though textures aren't great, the huge Deku Tree, stuff like the big castle, the town is super jank. It's tiny, but like the music and the dancing townsfolk, this underlying design direction that feels really solid, that I think still shines through a little bit. Having Death Mountain off in the distance, and then, when you're an adult, it, has that big ominous ring around it. Being in the Temple of Time for the first time, the music carries the game hard, like ambient wise. Like, I love being in that temple.
I feel like, from my perspective as a person who hasn't played it much, you're pretty close. The texture work is
Yeah,
pretty ugly. The dungeons are also very abstract spaces. Like they don't make much sense in terms of being real places. They're just dungeons for the sakes of being dungeons, which is fine. Like I that doesn't bother me too much. I like my gameplay spaces, but it's just big platforms and grates and grills everywhere that it feels like a gameplay space. I think the place that feels the most realistic is inside the fish's belly. Even though it's abstracted, it aesthetically captures the feeling of being inside a creature quite well, I think.
super cool when you enter and you turn around and you see his like teeth behind you. Is like
Yeah.
also leads to that creepy feeling. I also think that the character models, like the NPCs, emote surprisingly well for how little detail there is. The guy who takes over the ranch looks appropriately smug and arrogant. The guy that you have to, Malon's dad, Talon, who you have to wake up in front of the castle with the chicken, like animates, like when he gets up and he's like all surprised. That kind of stuff I think comes across reasonably well. It's very
I just remember the carpenters, like how they skip away. That's
yeah,
imprinted in my memory.
super good. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the standouts were actually. I know you said the town looks kind of jank, but I actually think the architecture of the towns is really good. It kind of like gives off small European village kind of vibes. It feels pretty bang on to me, and I think that the boss design is really well done. Like yes, it's a little low texture or whatever, but aesthetically they're very interesting and diverse designs. It's just like the general texture work for the level design is kind of bland and uninteresting in a lot of spots to me.
So let's go to a second music break, and then I want to get thoughts on individual items out of you, Pat. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
So for the next song, I think we'll just go with the Hyrule Field theme. I think it's iconic and definitely the one that I think about most when we play this game. So here's Hyrule Field. Alrighty, let's talk about items specifically. I want to know your favorite and least favorite items, how you felt they got used in the world, any interesting ways you found to find them, that kind of thing. Because to me, like, this was always the most exciting part of the
Well,
game.
I liked the hook shot specifically when it became the long shot the most because
Yep.
it could be used in combat as a weapon against most enemies, which was kind of surprising. And it was cool, seeing what I could hookshot onto and what I couldn't. And I was obsessed with trying to hookshot onto everything. My main disappointment with it is how little you can actually hookshot onto. It ends up being less expressive in terms of exploration than I was hoping. And you have to use those stupid beanstalks more than I thought you did. I like the boomerang. I like how the boomerang curves. It makes
Yeah.
for some interesting puzzles and combat scenarios.
It's a shame that it doesn't get as much use just because of when you get it. I'd forgotten about the bit at the start of the Spirit Temple, but I was so happy that like the boomerang got another chance to shine there.
However, using the boomerang on moving enemies like
Annoying.
is
Yeah.
very annoying. The lock on doesn't work how you would, and the game just doesn't have the camera control where you feel like you can learn to use it without a lock on effectively. I use the Deku Nuts a lot throughout the entire game. Stunning enemies is strong. You can stun a shockingly high number of enemies and just get free hits in. So I use those a lot. I got a fair amount of use out of the hover boots actually.
They're my favorite. I love them so much.
I know they're only mandatory in like a couple of bits, but I found like they let you cheat a lot of the platforming. There was one
Yeah.
spot in the where you're having to like stealth around the woman village.
Yes.
Yeah, there were a couple of bits where you could kind of use them to help you stealth around more
Yeah, like
effectively.
there's that like kitchen bit and you can like kind of go over it if you use the hover boots because there's like a little block.
Yeah. So what the thing is about all these items is you don't need them outside the dungeon ever, but I enjoyed playing around with them and seeing if they had effectiveness outside of it. The only thing is that sometimes and this happened more early on where it felt like you should be able to interact with enemies or the level in some way and you just couldn't because you didn't have the critical item. Like, it really frustrated me how the enemies were just invulnerable to your slingshot, for example. Slingshot's not going to do any damage anymore. It's like, well, what's the fucking point of giving me a ranged weapon? Then you make all the enemies, even just the regular enemies who I don't need to fight anyway, invulnerable to the slingshot. Generally speaking, it hits a pretty good balance where you don't need these items, but you can play around with them, and they do some optional stuff.
Yeah, I always enjoyed the hover boot. I find that The thing that makes me like or not like certain items is the aesthetic or concept of the item, I guess, which is why my favorite items as a kid were always the hover boots, because conceptually they're awesome. And I remember loving the mirror shield, even
Mm.
though, like, when I replayed it, I think it doesn't get as much use as it could. It definitely gets more use in Majora's Mask for sure. But the version in Ocarina of Time, I actually think there aren't enough puzzles that use it because conceptually there's like so much they can do with this idea, that I was a little disappointed that there was only two or three big puzzles that used it, and oftentimes it was just shine one light into a switch. The one where you have to redirect the crystals or the mirrors, I felt like they could do more stuff like that. Um, I then also really liked the ocarina itself because it has so many uses,
Mm.
lots of them optional, like the sun song or the rain song, etc. You can just use them in different spots.
Okay,
I don't know if you
can we talk about the fucking stupid time blocks? Because they like, why is there a
know.
block in the game where you play a song and the block disappears? Like, it's just stupid. Honestly, I don't know if I'm being irrational about that, but most of the time it's like there's a big rock. If I place a bomb, it will blow up, or there's a spot I can hook shot to. Now I can access this, but for some reason. There's a block where you play a song and the block disappears. No explanation given, no logical link even remotely related.
The idea is that you play the song a time, right? So the block moves to where it was at a different point in time.
But they inscribed the block with the
Yeah, that doesn't make sense at all.
yeah, because the clue to play the Song of Time is on the block, and it only affects those blocks.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
It does lock you in a room until you figure that puzzle out, though, which is I did not figure that puzzle out. I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And then I looked it up. It's like, yeah, obviously you play the Song of Time.
I also kind of like the Eye of Truth.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
fun gimmick. I liked it as well. Generally, the item roster here is pretty good. But like you said, it's not like they try and make you remember every mechanic and then combine them together into a mega puzzle. They needed more hook shotting levels though, just like entire level of hook shotting. But you know, I understand not wanting to do that. Like, I understand they didn't have that kind of like big 3D moving between levels progression generally. I I do have a question for you, James. Is Zelda a Metroidvania?
I don't really see why it wouldn't be.
I think basically, so I've been thinking about this for a long time, and obviously Zelda came out before Metroid, etc., etc. But yeah, I think that basically there's a lot of overlap, right? But there are things that are different about the games, and I think the big one is this concept of dungeons. Metroidvanias typically don't have dungeons where you know that whole structure you were talking about, how each dungeon you have to get keys and then you get the critical item in the dungeon and then you utilize that item in the dungeon, then there's a boss at the end of the dungeon. Metroidvanias will tend to have you discover an ability. That ability unlocks access to a part of the world, but then that new part of the world isn't like we're going to flesh out the use of this particular ability. It's more like this ability is now in your arsenal in combination with the rest of your abilities, and now you
Yeah,
progress through that area.
I think I like this more,
So,
um, because there's like a better
mm,
focus with the dungeons. I think if you find a way to make the overworld progression more enjoyable, and I don't mind it still, but I know everything, like what to do. Um, I think the game gets like I think it adds a lot, whereas I think in Metroidvanias all the areas sort of blend together a bit. Like I do think that Metroidvanias have branches that go into specific sections that are basically like dungeons, and then you come out of them and you go back to the main hubbish area and you find the next branch to go down. It depends on the layout.
like, I think that the point of Metrovanias is the meta progression, whereas
Yeah,
Zelda, the point of Zelda is the dungeons. And that's their strengths and their weaknesses. The overworld of Zelda isn't bad by any stretch, but you're not deriving pleasure as much pleasure as you are from Metroidvanias from unlocking it.
I see what you mean. Because the traversal of the world actually doesn't change that much, even with like the hookshot and the horse. And then the item usage actually is quite less relevant outside. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's like your character's power or movement ability isn't really going up, and you don't have these big moments where you get like double jump and now
Hmm.
suddenly the world looks different, right? Like it.
That's actually a really good way to put it. The power ups in Zelda are smaller. Like it's like adding tools to a tool belt. It's not like you're suddenly increasing in power
Yeah, your
level.
character's not getting stronger, and your ability to traverse the world isn't really meaningfully changing. Like, you get teleports and stuff, but like, you don't have to use them. They don't lock you.
Yeah, I didn't end up using the teleports nearly as much as I thought I would, just because once you finish a dungeon, there's not a reason to go back except to get, I guess, the optional collectibles.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's like, the Shadow Temple teleport's probably the most useful because it's in the village.
Well, the spirit temple is useful as well because
Because it's so isolated. Yeah.
because you need to change between kid and adult.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah, and the Temple of Time one is good too. But I guess maybe I use the Water Temple one. It's like the Fire Mountain one. Actually, I did use that when doing the sword quest.
Did you go after many of the collectibles? Because this is something we haven't really talked about. We've mainly talked about the main story content. But the truth is, Zelda is a game with a shitload of side content. You have all of the skulltulas that you have to destroy. You've got fishing mini games. You've got all the heart pieces to collect. And I know that you love collectibles. Banjo Kazooie is one of your favorite games of all time. You love
Mm.
Psychonauts and Sly Cooper's collectibles. How do you feel about the collectibles in Zelda?
I got what I could this time around. I didn't go super out of my way. I did the major side quests, like I got the big sword. Getting that big sword trivializes all the enemies because it like literally doubles your range and damage. It's crazy. I did most of the Skulltulas. Oh, not most. Like enough to get the Rumble Pack enabled and enough to upgrade the wallet, which I think you actually need to do that.
Isn't the first wallet upgrade like 10 or something? Like it's not.
It's like
Maybe it's
20 or
20. Yeah.
30, yeah. And then I didn't get, I only got like a couple hearts on the lower row. I got all the items. I didn't feel the need to do it because the combat's easy enough that I don't need the hearts, and it just made the game easier.
Yeah, see, that's actually a really interesting point, isn't it? Like you get so many heart, like you get a full heart every time you beat a boss. So whereas in Hollow Knight is the game that comes to mind. Every time you're finding an optional heart piece or masterpiece or whatever it is so
So
critical that you
crazy.
pursue it.
Yeah.
Like it's such a massive boost in power. But in this, you just don't need them.
Yeah, I mostly just got the masks because it was like not that hard to grab them, and it's kind of
Oh
fun
yeah, the
sometimes.
mask shop thing. I didn't do
Oh
any of
yeah,
that
you didn't
either.
do that. I did the whole thing.
So how does that even work? I was a little confused because it said you have to like rent the mask and then find a buyer and
Basically, each mask has like there's like a specific person that will buy it off you. So you get the mask, you give him the money, you go to the guy, he gives you money, you go back to the happy mask salesman, you get the next mask, repeat.
and
And
apparently when you have them all, you can read all those stones.
Yeah, so you get the Mask of Truth, which lets you talk to the little stones. It's actually quite annoying. You can't equip the mask as an adult, which there's actually an option in Ship of Harkinian that lets you use it as an adult, and I enabled that. Most of the hints they give you are completely useless. Like, I spoke to all the ones I found because I did the mask quest. You can finish it after you get the last of the three stones because
Hmm.
the last guy doesn't appear. He jogs around Hyrule Field. You have to go find him, but he doesn't appear until you've beaten Belly. It's kind of pointless. The masks in this game don't do anything other than that last one too. So
But I'm guessing they do something in Majora's Mask. Am I right?
yeah, like the bunny hood in Majora's Mask just makes you run faster, which is like great. really good.
Just keep that one forever.
Yeah.
Can you store all the masks in your inventory at once?
Yep, they add a new. You know how the menu has that like rotating menu when you
Yeah.
pause? It adds another panel that is just for masks because the
Is there an
same.
equivalent of Ship of Harkinian for it as well?
Yeah, I looked into this. I think he's working on it, but it's not out yet. Um,
Okay.
which is like when he does that, we're playing the game.
So okay, so you didn't really feel the collectible mania that you
Well, I
usually do with these games, or did you
no.
do it? You've done it once before, so you don't want to do it again.
Yeah, partly that. Also, I did all the major side quests, like getting Epona, and I did the masks, getting the sword, that kind of stuff. Getting the ice arrows, which you don't need, but getting all the spells, that kind of thing. Getting all the
Mm.
fairy upgrades. I didn't get every heart. I didn't get every spider token. That was pretty much the only things I didn't do, though.
Yeah, and I think going back to what I was saying before, I think that if you play this game without a walkthrough, you'll naturally end up dabbling a lot more in that kind of stuff because
Hmm.
you would get stuck and maybe mess around with other stuff in the game before coming back to the main quest. There's less intrinsic incentives, like you don't feel pushed to do side stuff to get benefits to your character. You just have to intrinsically like want to do it,
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it pressures you to do it. It's like if
and you
you
don't
want to
really
do
get
it,
much from it.
yeah. So it's like fun if you want to do it. If not, that's fine. Shops are useless in this game, by the way. I noticed that when playing, they seem completely pointless, other than the first one.
I mean,
Um,
rupees are completely worthless, right? Like getting
yeah,
rupees doesn't mean
it's
anything.
kind of impressive. You like max out your wallet like the whole game. uh,
Yeah, it's interesting because in the original Zelda, a lot of those shops contain critical items.
yeah, they were like super important. It's like
Yeah,
so.
those rings. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. How long did it take you to figure out? Did you get all the chickens?
Yes. So this is actually me cheating a bit because I have had done this bit before.
Ah, okay.
So I knew about the jank-ass jump you needed to do over the fence.
That was
Because
so
I had looked
funny.
up a walkthrough about it before. But yeah, that specific jump you need to make with the chicken was annoying. I also really liked there's like a bit as you're heading to not the water temple. This is when you're a kid when you're moving to the water area. Like it's one of my favorite areas in the game where you
Yeah,
have can
because there's a
use
bunch of hearts there.
yeah, yeah, and you can use the cuckoo, but you have to like keep it out of the water and you have to like throw it to keep it with you. That felt like an extended puzzle that was quite fun to figure out how to do you know to keep the chicken alive and with you the whole way through. So that was cool.
And what about stealth? How did you feel about the stealth sections?
Once again, I had memory of these because I'd played those. At least the first one with the guards, so I knew how to get through that. The bit with the Gerudos was fine because you could shoot them.
Did
If
you
you had to
shoot
go,
them?
yeah. So if you had to ghost your way through, it would have been a bit trickier, but it was fine. It was like a little diversion from the usual puzzles. I mean, it's a puzzle in and of itself. So
Yeah, I'm pretty much at the end of my notes. It's interesting hearing you talk about some of this stuff that like is not obvious to me as an adult. Because I do think that like all of the bits in this game kind of come together to create something pretty enjoyable. There's a few areas that have aged worse than others, like the combat and the texture work and that kind of stuff. But the game's like, I just love the game's like general optimism contrasted with all this dark stuff. It just feels really good to me. Like the progression through dungeons, getting the items, getting given new interesting puzzles over and over. And then like the big focus on like music and stuff makes it like feel like a pretty complete package to me.
I think for me, one of the things that really stands out, I didn't get into this too much earlier, but it's this concept of scale.
Yeah.
Uh, the problem with a lot of modern open world games is that they're too big. Like they're too big, and the open world trend towards bigger and bigger and bigger gives you it. I guess it loses a sense of you can kind of lose a sense of scale. Like if you're playing a GTA game and you're in a massive city, it feels too it
It's
by
bloated.
necessity it's filled with bloated and empty space. There's a lot of moving through empty space.
There's lots
The
of
thing
NPCs that just walk around and exist for the sake of it. Like,
with no gameplay value whatsoever, right? The
yeah,
thing about the scale of Zelda is that when you're in a dungeon or even the overworld, nowhere feels that far from anywhere else, and as a result, all of these spaces feel meaningful and dense with content. When you need to move from place to place, it takes like a minute at most. And when you're moving through the dungeons, they're not so big that you get lost in them. They're just the right size, you know? I felt this about the original Zelda 1 dungeons as well,
yeah.
except for that last one, but it's allowed to be too big because it's the final challenge. Sometimes you need things to be of a certain size for them to fit inside your brain nicely. And the Zelda dungeons hit the sweet spot in terms of scale for me.
I really agree with this point, and I think it's not just like the scale of the. I think the scale of the world allows more development time on things like NPCs and stuff, because the NPCs actually have like an internal logic that carries from like your young self to the future world. And like there's like this internal consistency that's only possible with a smaller scale. I feel like heaps of the characters in the overworld reference other characters and stuff like that. Like in the village, there's like a whole family who each talk about each other, especially when you're doing the sword quest. That's obvious. Like meeting the people from the ranch at the castle and then going back to the ranch and seeing them again. One thing I really liked, and I didn't understand this as a kid, and the game doesn't really do a good job of explaining it, but you know how after you get the horse, because you go back and the guy who was sort of the villain in the ranch is now like acting super friendly, and it's like kind of weird because he's like, I think the implication there is that he was getting the horse ready for Ganon. He loses the horse. He goes there. He gets punished, and his punishment is actually how the witches brainwash the Gerudo lady in the
Yeah, the
spirit
second in
temple.
charge. Yeah.
I think that's what happens to him, is that they force him to like, because he was miserable. He like, because if you talk to him as a kid, he's like, all he does is work, and the other guy's fat and lazy and doesn't do any work, but
Mm.
owns the ranch, and so he's mad about that. So his punishment is like to spend the rest of his life like eagerly serving that guy, kind of. I
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I feel like there's all sorts of stuff like that. If you at the end of the childhood section, after the horses run out of the town, and you run back into the town, you go around the back alley, and there's like that soldier clutching a wound at his side who talks about,
No.
yeah, and if you after you go through the temple, he's gone, like, because he like dies in that alley.
Right.
But like, yeah, completely random. There's like all this like stuff that makes the
Little
world feel
detail.
kind of
Yeah.
complete. Yeah, and I think that's only possible with the small scale.
It's so interesting. So another game I've been playing recently, I've been playing with our good friend Sarge's update of Give me Deus Ex Augmented
Oh yeah,
of Deus Ex, and I feel like those things you said are exactly what
makes
Deus Ex
Deus
is
Ex
like.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah, so Deus Ex has a similar thing where I think the scale of its level design is literally perfect. Like, I think that the levels are not too large and not too small, and it feels really good as a consequence. And it's got all of these little tiny interactions that you wouldn't expect. Like, the most famous one is when you go into the women's bathroom, you get told off by your boss. but it's a
Mm,
video game. You just explore all the bathrooms, right? But you get in trouble for going to the women's bathroom.
yeah.
But the game also reacts to you doing things like if you use non-lethal means instead of lethal means, the game picks up on that, and you'll get some kind of response from multiple different characters as to your approach. And it's only possible, yeah, with this kind of scale of a world where you don't have thousands of characters, you just have several.
Yeah, I wish I saw this thing more often because it like really does make it feel more alive in a way that
Yeah,
and
it's all trickery. It's little bits
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
pieces, but you don't actually need that much for it to push over the edge into believability when it comes to the world and the sense of world building. And you can see why this game has captured people's imaginations.
Yeah, and when we finally do Majora's Mask, the fact that like it's the same thing, but the NPCs all have like a fixed schedule over the course of the game, like over the
Mm,
3 days,
time
and
loop
they,
game.
yeah, it's crazy. It's so cool. I think it just makes it gives it a lot of personality.
All right, James, shall we move on to our final impressions?
Yeah, so for me, I'll go first because it's pretty obvious, right? Like this is one
You
of
hate
my
it.
yeah, this is
Terrible
the
game,
worst
right?
game ever made. No, like obviously I love this game to bits. I actually think that I would recommend this game to young children still. I'm less sure whether I would recommend this game to adults still in this day, but I think this really is a game for 12-year-old boys to love and adventure in and explore. And the game does lots of things to make, it gives you like cool older Link, and there's tons of young female characters that the game obviously is. They're super nice to you and they're super
Yeah.
friendly. Yeah.
Link has a bit of a harem going on, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah. There's
I
like
did
lots
notice
of
that. It
yeah,
was
there's
very funny.
lots of cute girls for the young boy to like,
All of them.
yeah, like all of them. So many. It's great. If you're that age. I think the puzzles are still actually fun. I've forgotten a lot of them and still find them fun to go through. The world is cool. I love the weird creepiness that we don't see in games like this too much anymore, unless it's like a full-on horror game. This middle ground I think is super cool. Music's great, obviously, like some of the best ever. Combat's mediocre as hell. I think the boss fights can be fun. I think they're good spectacles still. I believe they're not super satisfying, but it's just a really complete package, I think. The time travel thing is super cool. It just does a lot right, and it doesn't waste too much time. If you play games a lot, you really should play this one at some point because it's so like influential, and I still think it's fun to play. So yeah,
I also recommend Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I think this is a good video game. I think the thing that really makes it stand out, where I had my most fun with it, was the slower, more deliberate moments, specifically in the dungeons. Although not just in the dungeons, like that moment I said before, where you've got the cuckoo and you're exploring, I guess, trying to progress through that piece of overworld is still what I consider part of the good, enjoyable, fun level design. Basically, the puzzles and structure of these dungeons works well. Yes, it can be frustrating at times, but to me, that's just part and parcel of exploring a dungeon. There is going to be a degree of getting lost. That is just the price you pay. You can't smoothly progress through the dungeon every time because then there's no sense of exploration and adventure. And I think that's something that people forget sometimes when you have a linear game like God of War and you're just progressing through the area with one puzzle at a time, it's not nearly as frustrating, but you've lost that sense of exploration that a game like Zelda provides. And generally, it is a price that I'm worth paying. And I really want to shout out the Water Temple. I think the Water Temple, while it's not perfect by any stretch, it is a really fascinating example of how they turned an entire dungeon into like this single mechanism. It feels like there's this thing that pulls the whole thing together into a cohesive puzzle almost. And I hope that in future Zelda games, because I haven't played barely any of them, that they take what is good about the water temple and build on it to make, because this that to me should be the blueprint almost moving forward for good and innovative dungeon design. Where I think this game sucks is basically the action and the combat. From a modern perspective, modern games just do this better in pretty much every conceivable way. When this game was released, its combat was groundbreaking for sure, but this has to me has clearly been eclipsed and improved upon in many different ways. You can't say that about the dungeon design, although I haven't played an endless number of Zelda likes. I just know that I really enjoyed the more exploratory dungeons that I got to play with here. Stuff like the story, stuff like the overworld, it didn't impress me as much, but it wasn't a deal breaker. And I think that as long as you can get on board with the concept of being a bit lost sometimes, you'll have a really good time with Zelda. And I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, it's a good game.
It is a good
I
game. I mean, what a controversial statement.
yeah,
Zelda
it's not.
Ocarina of Time is a good game. Our listeners are going to be shocked that we think this game is good, James.
Sometimes we've played stuff that everyone says is amazing, and it's like not as great. I still think that it's easy to see why this game was as big as it was. Whereas I think
Hmm.
some games leave me scratching my head where I'm like I sort of still don't quite understand Super Metroid's popularity.
See, I do. Like, that game, like, I love Super Metroid.
Yeah.
I think that game is phenomenal. I cannot believe that game released in 91. Like, that game to me is like, that's a trailblazer. That game could have come out 5 years later, and honestly, it still would have been revolutionary.
Yeah, really liked the bit where it teaches you the secret move, kinda. That was the best part of the game. And then
I love stuff like, you know how you got the icicle beam and you could turn enemies into platforms by shooting them?
that was
Like,
cool.
that was so cool. Ah, what a great game. Metroid Prime was a disappointment.
Was it? I
Well,
lo-
I felt the 3D macro level design of Prime was horrendous. Like, it just, the way that world connected together to me was just completely nonsensical and was such a downgrade from the 2D version.
Yeah, because I loved Prime.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Prime gameplay was fine when you weren't shooting the super tanky enemies, but the macro level design, which was my favorite part of Super Metroid, was not there. So it felt frustrating. Anyway, so thank you so much for listening to us talk about Zelda Ocarina of Time. My name is Patrick Arthur. I was joined by James Turlings to talk all about this video game. We are the Retrospectors podcast. You can find all of our content on our website, which is rspodcast.net. It's got links to all 133 of our episodes. So if you like what we do, there is plenty more to listen to. And we'll pop in links to our Discord server where we take recommendations and have discussions of the episodes and about anything else. And we'll also put a link into our Buy Me a Coffee page if you would like to support the show monetarily. So Zelda out of the way. That was a long game. It took me a while to actually get through this. So it's been a while since our last episode, but we're on to something new and a game I recommend. And we're doing another Nintendo 64 title. We're running it back.
Hell yeah.
So the game I have selected is Perfect Dark.
Ooh.
This game, we did GoldenEye for the show a while back, and it was not very good. It's a pretty bad video game.
Yeah, see
It was
that's
saved.
one of the games I should have mentioned. Is like,
Oh yeah,
yeah. That's the perfect
that is the
game.
perfect example of a game people rave about, and then you play it and it's mediocre trash and a very clear cut below the PC shooters of the same era. It's embarrassing, honestly. It introduced some interesting things like locational damage, but for the most part, that game is garbage, and it would have been even worse on the Nintendo 64 because I played with a mouse and keyboard hack, and it was tolerable with that.
As the current generation says, that game is friend slot. Like you
Yes.
played it at your friend's house, it was fun because of the friends, but the actual gameplay was
Is garbage.
like
Yeah.
not even
But
mid.
Perfect Dark is a game I played multiplayer a lot with friends, but I know that Perfect Dark has a reputation for dramatically improving upon the GoldenEye formula. And it also has a mouse and keyboard hack / repackage, exactly the same as GoldenEye, exactly the same as Ocarina of Time, which is what I'll definitely be using. It might even be the same one, Project 1964. I'll have to look that up. But I'm very excited because I know that there are people who absolutely adore Perfect Dark and consider it a genuine cut above GoldenEye. So we got to see if any of these Nintendo 64 shooters are actually all they're cracked up to be.
Yeah, I Star Fox 64. I don't know if that counts as a shooter, but that it was an on-rails shooter and that
A
was
rail
fun.
shooter.
Yeah.
Star Fox 64 is a masterpiece. I loved that game. So
I agree, it's sick. Yeah, we can do Perfect Dark for sure. I owned this one as a kid, so I remember a lot of it. It didn't grip me as a child, so I never finished it. But I do remember giving it a good crack a couple of times. The weapons definitely are a lot more fun than they were in GoldenEye, and I think the level and mission design is somewhat more interesting. You kind of have like I think the objectives are more in depth. I think.
no, it's been a while since we've done a shooter. So damn, we need to do a stealth game again as well.
Yeah, when was the last stealth game? I kind of want to check now.
Metal Gear Solid 2?
Huh.
Surely not that long ago. We
Uh,
could do Thief 3, Metal Gear Solid
I
3.
guess Zelda had stealth in it.
Yeah, Zelda's a stealth
Zelda's
game,
a
right?
stealth game.
Yeah.
Rain World. Oh no,
I
wait, we
murdered
did Blood
everything.
Money.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think Hitman Blood Money counts as a stealth game.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening to us today, and we'll see you next episode for Perfect Dark.
Thanks for listening. See yous.